Hi, I'm Ted London, Senior Research Fellow at the William Davidson Institute, and I'm here with Madison Ayer, who's the co-founder and chairman of Farm Shop. Madison, thanks for being here.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Ted.
Farm Shop is something that you've invested in, you've created. Can you talk a little bit about, the founding story of why you did this and what you've begun to do?
Farm Shop began out of my work with Honey Care Africa, and through Honey Care, one of the challenges we had to figure out was distributing beehives and other beekeeping equipment to rural smallholder farmers. And we were looking for established channels to do that, and looked to a broad network of small informal retail shops that existed in rural villages throughout Kenya. And as we looked at those to see if these could be partners for distributing these honey beekeeping equipment, we realized that these shops were very immature, had very low resources, and would not make very good partners for distribution. And so we actually began to look at what would the system be if these shops were improved, if they were networked together, if they had more resources. What could that network look like? And we realized that this was actually a fundamental issue across all of the rural ecosystem, and that if we could build this network, it wouldn't just be for beekeeping equipment, it would be for all the basic farming inputs that these rural smallholder families needed.
So you saw an opportunity. What did you do?
We very much saw an opportunity. We put together quite quickly, Farouk Jiwa and I, who's the other co-founder, we put together what this concept would look like on paper. And we were quite lucky that within a very short time, we were able to get our startup funding in place to begin piloting the concept. And this was through a very forward-looking family foundation in Canada called the Comart Foundation. And they saw the vision of what this would do and how this might change the rural ecosystem by building a micro-franchise network of agro-dealers. And so they provided the support, and we were able to get the project launched.
Assuming this is grant funding, but this is a for-profit enterprise.
We launched it as a not-for-profit in order to test a variety of models for the distribution of these inputs, a variety of models around a retail concept or around a franchise concept. And the idea being that every smallholder farmer in Africa is simply a retail consumer of basic farming inputs. So a modern retail concept with customer service and transparent pricing, quality of products, basic marketing, and a customer experience, we believed that ultimately would be the most sustainable method for distributing these inputs. We didn't know exactly what the model would look like under that theory, and so that's what all of the initial grant funding for the nonprofit was designed to test.
You've mentioned this idea of pilot and experiment and things like that. Can you talk about what you did? How did that unfold?
Well, we put down on paper what we thought the model shop would look like, and then we put in place everything we needed to pick a shop and convert it, which we did. So we launched our first shop. That one ended up being a disaster. We assumed it would be a disaster because we had to test all of these things. And so we ended up over the period of about the first 18 months, I think we had launched 4 shops. And this was everything to test whether or not the local farmers would actually make purchases in the shops. It would test what kind of resources the shops needed to have, what kind of resources the entrepreneur or the local shopkeeper needed to have, explore relationships with suppliers to determine whether or not we could build direct supply relationships, and figure out how we would market all of this and then track whether or not it worked. That's really what we did over the first 18 months with those test shops.
Is the goal economic viability and scalability, or how do you see that unfolding?
Yes. So we believe that as a market-based system, ultimately this should become self-sufficient. It should become sustainable. It does generate cash flows. It's about selling products and distributing products. It's very market-oriented. It should not require subsidies at scale. That's the theory of it. And thus far, the trends seem to be pointing in that direction. So we have 25 active shops currently, and we believe somewhere around 125, the entire organization will break even and become sustainable. On an individual unit level, the shops themselves, they typically will become profitable and cash flow positive within the first couple of months of converting. So on a unit basis, it's a very fast return, and overall building the infrastructure of the network should also become sustainable at that scale.
What's the relationship between farm shops and the different shop owners?
So we look primarily for existing agro-dealer shops that are operating, but are just operating more informally. They're certainly not up to the capacity of what they could be. And so we engage those shop owners to become franchisees, and they'll go through a process of training, rebuilding of the shop. It's about a 90-day process typically. And at which point, if they've come up with their down payment, if they've attended all the trainings, if their shop is ready for conversion, then we convert it, and they become a formal franchisee. So they sign a dealer agreement, and then from that time on, we become the supplier of all the products to the shop. We help them to manage all of the marketing. They track all of their records through our proprietary point of sale system that we've developed. So they have an actual tablet in the shop that runs all of this technology, and they have access on an ongoing basis to all of those resources, as long as they meet all of the requirements of the franchisee agreement.
And you've mentioned you're at 25 shops, and you break even at about 125, and you sound very optimistic about the future. What are the sort of the core reasons for the optimism of this enterprise?
I think fundamentally it's the validation that this concept is working in the market. And it's easy to get excited about other things that are more tangential when you're in the startup world. But first and foremost, nothing really matters until you've proven that there's a fit with whatever you're doing in the market. And because it's the market that decides whether you will survive or not the creativity of your idea. And what we've seen is that farmers really trust in the farm shops. They really identify with the guaranteed quality of the products. They value very much the advice, and whether it's agronomic advice, whether it's animal advice, just basic product advice they can get through the franchisee or through our farm shop team, and that's being reflected in the numbers. So on average, shops that are converting are going from they're doing about 50,000 to 60,000 shillings, so that's about $600 in sales per month. And after converting to farm shop, on average now, they're doing anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. So we're talking 500+% improvement in revenues. The shopkeepers, the franchisees that are really following the program as tightly as possible, that have really committed to it, they're seeing increases. They're doing $20,000 or $30,000 per month. In the same shop, they were previously doing $500 or $600 in sales in. So those numbers don't lie, and now we're seeing it as we open more and more shops. We're seeing that replicated, which really proves that there is a market for this. The farmers are doing it. It makes sense to the franchisees, and that's what gives me the optimism overall.
You're beginning to be a serial entrepreneur in Base to Pyramid. You run Honey Care Africa. You run farm shops. Looking back at your experience, and maybe particularly with farm shops now, but factoring in honey care, if there was some advice or lesson that you've, either, through the piloting or some things you've done that you would think would be something that would be particularly valuable to share to other entrepreneurs in this space, what would it be?
I think there are two things, one more abstract and one more concrete. The concrete one is to take a very lean approach at building something, whether it's an organization, whether it's an individual product or service, whether it's a new partnership or a distribution channel. Figure out how to test it quickly and cheaply, and iterate those over and over and over and over until you're sure you've got it. Don't commit significant resources of time or money or human capital to anything before you've gotten through a lot of quick tests on it. That's particularly critical in these markets where the context can be so different and where the markets themselves can be so dynamic and infrastructure can be so volatile. It's critical not to invest too much time up front. Just test stuff quickly. The more abstract thing is build a business, build products, provide services that reinforce trust with the market. Trust is even more important at the base of the pyramid than it is in any other market. In more developed markets, in more Western markets, we have legal frameworks to fall back on. In the base of the pyramid, there is nothing other than trust. And so products have to be authentic. Your delivery of them has to be credible. It has to be dependable. If you're providing services, they have to deliver true value. There can't be any question of that because there's simply no fallback. And if you're not doing that, which reinforces the trusts with your consumers in the market, then there simply aren't the resources, there's not the spending power that will enable you to survive.
Madison, thank you for your time, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you. It's always great to be here.